Good evening. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I knew you'd like Dr. McDonald and Dr. Cole, and I was very pleasantly surprised by Aaron. Aren't they amazing speakers? And that was just a sneak preview of what we're going to have tomorrow when we have a 2-hour panel with them. With certainly 2 doctors, Dr. Peter McCullough, Matt Staver, Patrick Byrne will be coming back, on a topic that you've all, I hope, thought about, which is restoring intellectual curiosity and critical thinking in higher education. And that's it, right? That's what we're here. That's what you guys are listening to tonight. You're listening to new and fresh and bold ideas from doctors. And as Dr. Cole just reminded you, you are the best doctors, because how many of you in this room have been a little frustrated in the last 2 years when you've gone to your own doctors and tried to have an actual conversation about what's best for you or for your child? Have you had frustrations? Okay, and if you want to know why you've had frustrations, it's because in my 33 years in medicine, I have never known a time, I've never envisioned a time where physicians can't even have a simple dialogue about the best way to treat the most common disease that we encountered in the last 2 years. So I am indeed a family doctor, okay? It's my vocation. My son was at a boxing class yesterday, and the boxing coach, Tito, came up to me and said, Dr. Littell, you have a calling. You were called by God to do what you're doing. I said, amen, brother. I was called by God to be a doctor. All right? It is a calling. And so when you have a calling, what do you do when a federal agency comes and knocks on your door, sends you a letter and says, hey, Dr. Littell, you got to do something a little different right now because this ain't right. This is not what the CDC recommends. This is not what the FDA recommends. This is not what the American Board of Family Physicians recommends. What do? Do you listen to them or do you listen to your heart? Your God-given sense of reason, the critical thinking capabilities that we all have and that you are making sure your children have as they pursue degrees in medicine and law and business. You are doing that, and you have to keep doing that. So, you know, today I kind of a show and tell guy. By the way, this book that I wrote called The Hidden Truth, and I have it out there, I had to write this mostly because my conversations with my patients were getting very long. And that's great. You want to have a conversation with your patients. But after several years, I said, you know, I got to write a book so I can just say, would you read the book? And God, you would read the book, right? You all would read the book. So, but I wrote this a few years ago. Your pediatrician or family physician does not see himself or herself as acting as an agent of the federal government. He or she is simply acting upon recommendations made by organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, Family Physicians, OBGYN. And these organizations are advocating what they believe is in the best interests of the population. So what we physicians have been inculcated with, brainwashed into doing, is what's called population health. And when they come to my office and want to talk about population health now, I say, guys, I'm not treating populations. I'm treating the patient in my exam room. And just as Dr. McDonald said, no masks. There was one practice in Kissimmee and one practice in Ocala, Florida, that never shut its doors in the last 2 years. And that was our practice. Because I said, we're not doing this telehealth garbage, all right? Even when the insurance companies last year said, Dr. Littell, you could have made an extra $50 per patient visit if you had done telehealth. There was an incentive for that. We were incentivized, and right now as we speak, doctors across this country and hospitals have been incentivized for doing what's known as telemedicine. So let me say this. You know, physicians of conscience, that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about creating men and women with informed consciences. What's that going to take in this new world where most people coming out of medical schools truly do not have a fully formed conscience? And I can say that because I teach medical students. And so many of them are just looking at what I'm doing and they're scratching their heads. They've never known a doctor that just wouldn't do what the patient asked them to do. Whether it's they want an abortion or they're a couple that wants to go out and have a baby with my assistants and they're not a man and a woman, all right? And when I tell couples like that, I say, listen, I love you. I mean, you're my patient, but I cannot go against what God has told me is the right thing to do and give the two of you a baby. in medical schools nowadays. The American Family Physician Journal, 2 months ago, had an article on how to approach taking a sexual history with patients. Now, I won't get into all the details, but one thing that came right out there and jumped right off the page to me is that it is no longer considered appropriate for your physician to ask you if you're monogamous, because that's a judgment-laden term. Rather, the doctor needs to ask you, how many sexual partners do you have and what sex are they? That is not a judgment. And by the way, it gets much more detailed than that. As a matter of fact, there's an online chat group for doctors called Doximity, and doctors have all heard about that. And the latest thing that came up on Doximity that I was actually going to show you tonight, but we had a little trouble trying to project things, was the latest thing that the FDA developed, or rather approved of, to prevent a sexually transmitted disease known as HPV, which I cover in detail in here, okay? Now, before I talk about what that latest device is that's going to prevent HPV transmission in sexually active persons, let me explain to you that what I know about how Merck rolled out the HPV vaccine and what the CDC promulgated to doctors is based on nothing but lies about you and your children. Blatant lies. For example, they would say to us doctors that 80% of the women in America will contract HPV in their lifetime. That means by the time they're 50. That means that 8 out of 10 of you women have had HPV. All right, now I know that's a lie, and how they got that statistic was they took a Planned Parenthood clinic, college kids who showed up there, they tested them for HPV on their pap smears, and 20-something% were positive, and they basically extrapolated to the age of 50 based on this sexually active group. So now what you see is happening in medicine is there's a presumption of promiscuity that is basically what every doctor has to accept with these vaccines that your kids are getting. Whether it's Gardasil or hepatitis B, which, you know, thanks be to God, I was enlightened about all this not that many years ago. I said, I'm not going to do this with our kids anymore in my practice. Why are we giving children at birth a vaccine against a disease they can only get by sex or blood? All right? Why is the medical profession doing this? Because it's appealing to this presumption that that baby's mother is an IV drug user who has hepatitis B and the baby's going to contract it and yada, yada, yada. This is not what we should be doing in society. Hepatitis A vaccine is another lie. But what this latest product was, and I'm going to say it very quickly, and I'm going to go right past the next one, is edible panties, that actually the product in the panties can actually stop HPV from causing oral sex. Now, I said it quickly, but I had to say it because the conversation among the doctors in this group was, oh, that's great, what flavors does it come in? I can't wait to recommend this to my kids. That's where the doctors of today are. And when I dare to say in this dialogue, which should be a dialogue, that this is not the way we should be addressing STD prevention in children, well, you can imagine the response. It was like, where are you coming from, doctor? That's how you must be from another planet. Don't you realize how many children are having this kind of sex and how often and with whom? So you guys are fighting a fight in your own way. We're fighting a fight in the doctor's office. So I want to close with some other ways that we're fighting the fight. You all know about what happened the last 2 years. You know there were doctors who, like myself, treated patients with COVID in a lot of different ways, okay? Over 3,000 patients across the country that I was able to treat by the grace of God and with assistance from my daughter. Well, I'm going to ask them to project a few quick letters that I got, love letters that I got. Can you show the first one? The first letter came from, if they got it pulled up there, it's sort of a jump drive. These are the kind of things that a lot of, this first letter came from Florida Blue, September 15th, telling me that they're going to audit all my charts for writing for ivermectin. The next one, please. Advent Health in Orlando actually penalized me for, you can move to the next slide because I don't want them to see all the details, for allowing patients to have their wife and their husband come visit them before they died while they're on a ventilator at no risk of transmitting the disease. Priests and chaplains come and pray with them, all right? I was penalized for that. I was penalized also for giving ivermectin to a woman who was desaturating right in front of me. This is from the American Board of Family Medicine. Again, this is from January of this year, saying they were going to review my practice right, my right to practice medicine as a family physician. The next one is from HCA Healthcare, saying that if I didn't go to mandatory psychological counseling because of my attitude, that I would lose my privileges to practice medicine. Next one is from the Florida Department of Health, and this one just came to me last week, a subpoena for records. This is the one that's most amazing to me. They're all bad. This came from a Michigan assistant professor at the University of Michigan who saw a patient who showed up there for oxygen therapy and had gotten ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine from me. They wrote a letter to the Florida Department of Health saying, investigate this doctor, and I'll quote to you exactly what the doctor wrote, and then I'm going to let you guys get to the next thing. He wrote, a cursory search into the background of this provider, Dr. Littell, indicates that he's openly advocating against vaccination for COVID. He's going against public health measures, including masking, which is in line with CDC recommendations, and most concerningly, he's been prescribing medications across state lines to hundreds of patients. It's my opinion that he's an imminent threat to patients in Florida and across the country. And so that's being reviewed right now. Now, what's good, guys, and why I bring this out into public, and a lot of people wouldn't, is there's a signature at the bottom of that page, which is Dr. Joseph Latipo. And Dr. Joseph Latipo is a friend of mine, and he's our new Surgeon General. This was put out without his knowledge, this signature on this paper. And he says, Dr. Littell, you feel free to share that with the public, because now I can hop into this mess. Because when he went to the Florida Department of Health and said, why are you sending these letters out with my signature without my knowledge? He said, we've been doing this forever. This is what we do in Florida. He said, not under my watch. Wow. So you pray for Dr. Latipo. I got to close with this. You know, I said pray for Dr. Latipo. My 13-year-old son and I were talking today. We got to pray for those who persecute us. Because the only way the medical profession is ever going to change is not with anger. Even though I'm very angry sometimes, right? We have got to figure out a way to come to these wonderful men and women who took this Hippocratic oath, this pledge to save lives. And you, I need each and every one of you to go into your doctor's offices as soon as you can and say, doctor, can I pray with you? Can I pray for you so that the truth, the spirit of truth will come upon you and this practice, because that's the only hope we have.